Thank you, Aaron, for that awesome introduction. I couldn't have crumpled that piece of paper and put it in the camera and better myself. So, well done, thank you. Like Aaron had said, up next we have a presentation. It's a debate called No Room at the Inn. It will be featuring Taylor Tefft, who represents Loyalist Coalition for the Homeless, or Ross, who's a Catholic Studies minor, as well as Matt Lamb, who represents Catholic Studies minors as well. And Taylor, you can take it away first.
Hi everyone, I'm Taylor. Like Stephen said, I am the co-chair of the Loyalist Coalition for the Homeless. And we're part of the larger Chicago Coalition for the Homeless, which is an advocacy organization. So we don't do direct service. It's not like soup kitchens, but instead we do fight larger structural changes through like political systems, but then we also collect or connect homeless individuals to
Right.
This is cool.
Thank you.
I've never used one of these before. Wow. Okay, I'll have to talk quieter because I have sort of a loud voice. So, like I said, we do advocacy work. So next week we'll be going to Springfield to lobby for certain budget items like emergency and transitional housing and things like that, homelessness programs. So I'm here to talk to you today specifically about a campaign we're doing right now called REAL. It stands for Rent Ethically, Act Locally. Cool. So this situation came up, or we became aware of it last spring when myself and a few other members of the coalition were contacted by a community organizer in the area.
That mic, pull it down. Not yours,
Maybe this one.
Yeah.
Good.
Thank you, Aaron.
Okay, so we were contacted by a community organizer to let us know about a building called Astor House. That's a photo of it. It's on Pratt, just one block in from Sheridan. So Pratt is just like a little bit north of Starbucks, if you know where that is. So what was happening with Astor House is that fall 2012, so fall of last school year, it was bought out by a company called BJB, which is a real estate company that has been buying up a lot of properties on the north side. A lot of times, should I go right here? Okay, cool. A lot of times, buildings that have tenants who are using affordable housing. So that means they could have like Section 8 vouchers, which is where you get a subsidy from the government to then go into the private housing industry and you get subsidies, so you get reduced rent, and the government essentially pays the difference to your landlord. So a lot of them were on those sorts of things, and that was what the situation at Astor House. So when BJP bought the building, what we've seen of their business model throughout the north side of Chicago is that a lot of times these buildings are in disrepair and it's low-income tenants, and what they'll do is sort of flip the building and then sell it to people who can pay higher rents, which in this situation in our neighborhood is Loyola students. So what was happening was either people were being unjustly evicted, or their conditions would get so bad that they would be forced to move out. So for example, there's one woman who had a son who had to be hospitalized because bed bugs were so bad, and she had complained to her landlord multiple times, and yet not, and then basically the landlord just didn't respond ever after this company took over. So myself and a few others went to a protest that they were having to try to stop this from happening, and the thing that stuck out to me was that there was a ton of animosity towards Loyola students. A lot of the people in the neighborhood were frustrated that this was happening. They were saying they're just trying to sell this building to Loyola students, because what was happening too is some apartments in the unit had been remodeled and then were being sold to not just Loyola students, but like North Park students in the area for triple the rent. So they were paying more, but also living in better conditions. So like I said, there was a lot of animosity towards the students, which for me was very alarming, because I just thought, students don't even know this is happening. I don't know this is happening, and what can we do about it? So in working with the community organizations through that, we came up with this campaign called REAL to try to stop this from happening in the future, and just to make students aware of what is going on and their presence in the neighborhood. So that was a while back, so what's happening now? Unfortunately, all the tenants who originally lived in Astor House, even people who have been living there for 10 plus years, are no longer living there. Either they were evicted or conditions were so bad that they were forced to move out. And where we can see some of the injustice coming in is that even if they're being unlawfully evicted, the tenants don't have the means to hire lawyers to help them win their cases. So when it goes to court, there's no way for them to win because they can't afford to hire adequate legal aid. So yeah, a lot of them moved out, some of them, or all of them moved out, some of them are to this day still living in their cars, and that's what's going on. But a group of the tenants are organized in the neighborhood, and they're going out into the neighborhood and interviewing other people to see if there are other buildings at risk of this happening. Because if you're familiar with what's happening with affordable housing in Chicago in general, and especially on the north side, there's been an incredible decline. So they're just, which also makes it hard because then when people, so say they get evicted out of Astor House, it's very, very hard to find another place to live because A, there are not a lot of affordable buildings, but also B, Astor House is on the list of buildings that have really bad bed bugs and rodent problems, and city, like landlords can see lists of which buildings have those problems, so they don't want to let people come and rent from them because bed bugs can be infested in your like furniture, bedding, things like that. So they don't want to let them into their housing because they could be carrying the bed bugs. So basically, after a lot of them are evicted or had to leave, they just are out of luck and don't really have anywhere to go. And I think that's where we can see where this campaign ties into what we're talking about today, is that the problem is that people are being seen as numbers, and who can pay the highest rent for this building, who can pay the highest rent for this apartment, then that's who we're going to prioritize. And it's easy to forget that these are human beings. They have nowhere else to go, and especially if affordable housing in general is declining. After they leave Astor House, they still have nowhere to go except their cars or shelters. So that's what we wanted to stop happening. So, as the campaign, one of our main focuses is to raise student awareness to students like you. I feel deeply that Loyola students don't want this to be happening and they wouldn't stand for it, but they just don't know. It's hard to know. I mean, it's hard to know what's going on in the building. It's hard to know who was renting it before you or what happened. So we're trying to raise awareness that this is happening, and we, as students with a lot of privilege in the neighborhood, can do something to stop it. And we tied it in sort of, we have a student pledge that people can sign that's related to the student promise saying, I promise to rent from ethical places. I promise to be a positive presence in the neighborhood, to think about how my actions are affecting the neighborhood. And we've seen this from things like not throwing your garbage on people's lawns to spending 20 extra minutes when you're moving off campus researching who lived in this building before me, what company owns my building, do they have just practices? And that like 20 minutes of Google searching could mean better housing for someone in the neighborhood. It also means, like for example, in our student awareness campaign that we are doing, I came into contact with a student who is living in a building. She lives across from a woman. Their apartment is newly renovated. The apartment across from them is not. It's their neighbor, so they interact a little bit. And she said the conditions are horrible. The landlord never responds to her neighbor's complaints. And then this Loyola student is paying triple the rent. So those are the situations that we're trying to raise awareness of, and sort of encouraging students to, if you notice this happening, say something, talk to your landlord about it. You as a student have tenants' rights that you can do something about, and we as students can do something to prevent this from happening, and to have, if we have neighborhood change, to make it a positive one. If we're gonna live in this neighborhood, to have good interactions, to have healthy interactions, to build a better neighborhood that includes longtime Rogers Park residents and us as students, because we are a large presence in the neighborhood. So, you might be asking what you can do in this situation. So like I said, just thinking about who you're renting from, who your actions are affecting as you move off campus, as you live off campus, just think about what am I doing? Spending 20 minutes looking into your landlord. Who are they? What company do they work for? Do they work for a company or not? What are these companies' business practices? And being aware. You can also know your rights as a tenant, which a lot of students don't know. Because we are a transitional community, a lot of students don't stay in one apartment. A lot of students don't know that they have certain rights. So you have tenants' rights. You can look them up online. If you Google Chicago tenants' rights, then you can find a list of them. And yeah, what we're really encouraging people to do is just speak up. If you notice these things happening, say something. Talk to your landlord about it. When you are talking to landlords potentially moving in, ask them about their business practices, about who else lives in the building, who lived there before you, etc. So you can follow us online if you want more information. We've been doing a lot of events and bringing people in. Just last week we had former Astor House residents come in and talk about their experience. And that's what we really want to do. We want to foster relationships between people in the community and us as students. A lot of, like, it's great to interact with them. We had an awesome time hearing from them last week and having students interact. So that's what we're trying to do. You can follow us online or ask me any questions, but this is just a practical example of sometimes what gentrification or just neighborhood change can look like in general. And we just want to encourage people to really think about their actions and to think about the privilege we have as students and what we can do to make sure that good relationships are being made in the community and change is positive for everyone, not just students or just neighborhood residents. Thanks.
All right.